hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome back to another episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. I'm Lee Elias, and I'm joined by Christie Burns and Mike Benelli. Our guest today has one of the greatest hockey resumes in the game. He is a Stanley Cup winning coach, a multi-champion Canada Cup coach, a KHL Gagarin Cup winning coach, an AHL championship coach, and has coached and managed some of the greatest hockey players that have ever lived. Literally too many to name. So we'll just use Wayne Gretzky, Mark Messier, and Mario Lemieux as quick examples. His biography, Iron Mike, was released recently from Random House Books and is available everywhere. And now, yes, you can guess, we all recommend it. Ladies and gentlemen, he is one of the greatest coaches in NHL history. Please join me in welcoming Mike Keenan to the show today. Mike, welcome to Our Kids Play Hockey.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be here with you to share some stories and also talk about hockey with young children as participants and as parents who have children playing hockey. It's great to be with you.
Well, Mike, it's great to have you. I got to be honest with you. We've all been reading your book here probably for the last couple weeks. So I actually feel like I've been sitting in a room with you having these conversations already for a few weeks because this book is so well written and so conversational. I mean, it's not my favorite pun, but it's like wine, man. It was really well done. So I appreciate you writing it, and I appreciate you sharing your story first off.
Well, thank you. And I think Scott Morrison did a super job. It was a real arduous process. It started with Jay Greenberg, who, God bless, passed away early in the process of writing the book. And Scott was monitoring, and it was a great friend of Jay's, and Scott decided and was really kind enough to pick it up and carry on the project until we come to a finale and got the book out.
I'm curious, Mike, what made you want to write this book? There's so many great stories, obviously, that you share. Your career, amazing. But what motivated you to write this book? What was it that said, I got to get this out to the people and put them in people's hands, this book?
I think it was Scott Morrison, really, and Jay Greenberg. I was reluctant to write the book or tell the stories. I said, who wants to really read about that? And then you go through that process, they poke the bear and more stories come out. And the interesting part of that book or this book is that I could write another one with the stories that I miss. I've been with some of my players recently, our 30th reunion with the New York Rangers, and Steve Larmer was there telling a story. And he turned to me, did you put that in the book? I said, I've forgotten all about it. So it was interesting process as you got into it deeper with Scott, particularly doing a lot of research, and we've had a lot of history. I've known Scott since the late 70s, so he had a real grasp on my background, and I think that was really helpful.
Well, we're going to dive into some of the stuff from the book today, but I'm going to let the audience know right now, we're not even going to scratch the surface of everything that's in here. Really recommend you pick this up or grab the audio book. We really enjoyed it. And, Mike, I do want to start with this. You wrote early in the book that you got the coaching bug once you were done playing. And I really love the way you kept speaking about that. I wanted to coach, but I wanted to ask you and explore with you what the coaching bug really means and how it wasn't just limited to hockey, because it is a calling.
Well, I wasn't sure how it really started, but I can tell you, I know exactly the moment I sort of grasped the idea that I thought I would really enjoy this. Is I was coaching lacrosse. I played lacrosse in the Ontario, outside of Toronto, in the Ontario region I was raised in Whitby, Oshawa. It's a big hotbed for lacrosse. So I was coaching the high school lacrosse team. They asked me to coach in Don Mills Collegiate before I went on to Forest Hill. And at that moment, I said, I'm having a lot of fun and enjoying working with these young people and participating with them. I was young. I was 25 or 24 years of age. So we'd do the 5-mile run, and I would run with them. We would practice. I would practice with them. But I really enjoyed the smiles on their faces when we were very successful. We won the regional championship. And that, to me, I've had a connection with these young people that were learning more about a skilled game, a team game, a fitness, how I could help them improve as athletes, and how I could build them into a team, and how they could accept different responsibilities and roles. And that was really exciting for me. So that's really where it all started.
What I love about it, Mike, is that I think sometimes, especially with parents and volunteer coaches, there is a misconception that it's all about the hockey and the knowledge of hockey. And don't get me wrong, that obviously plays into being a successful coach. But I love that you said the coaching bug, and I love that you did lacrosse, and I love that you talked about it was the connection with the people and the fun that you found, and that's really it's not limited to the sport, right? That aspect of coaching is really what's powerful.
It really is. And parents get a little bit, I think, sidetracked
Mm.
when they emphasize the importance of winning, particularly with young people, rather than the process of having and enjoying the game and having fun with their teammates, and all the experiences of travel and competition, and being a part of a team that works together. So I think those things are very valuable that parents sometimes lose sight of, and they become so focused on what their particular son or daughter did that game and how the outcome uh, was part of that, their investment in their time. And it's about the process, it's about the fun. It's particularly when you're talking about children. I coached minor sport, and I coached a little bit different, maybe a lot different than when I coach pro. It's professionals are getting paid, that's their livelihood. The amateurs, particularly young people, are there to enjoy it. I mean, then you step up where I coach junior, and those kids are trying to make an impression, and go to the professional level. And at the University of Toronto, that was a completely different set of circumstances. I was a graduate of St. Lawrence University, as you can see, and then the University of Toronto, and I played at both schools. So those individuals were enjoying the game as well, because particularly in grad school, when I was in University of Toronto, they were really focused on their careers and their academics more than the hockey, but they loved to play hockey. So it was the context of parents and people playing and working in different levels in different sports. They have to come to the realization that these children, first and foremost, should be having fun.
It's a great lesson for parents to learn now. You're giving them this information now before making mistakes. We all make mistakes along the way. I got to ask you though, you've had so much success, but not without controversy. So in the book, you're not shy about that either. Do you look back and do you think, maybe my temperature was up a little too high at times?
Well, of course, I've often responded to that kind of comment, that I would maintain the principles that I worked with, but probably we could alter the methodology a little bit.
Okay.
And as you said, the temperature was up to a point where I was my own distraction at times.
Hmm.
But that was the competitive fire I had in me. And particularly when you get to the pro level, that was really the essence of my coaching being, was to succeed and to win. And I felt, as a professional, that's your job, that's your responsibility to the owner, to the fan base, to the players that you're coaching. Uh, Winning uh, is exceptional, and it's very difficult to win. But that was my focus.
Hey, Mike. So I think Lee brought it up in the opening about all these great leaders. Obviously, you're one of them, but the leaders that helped you on each individual team. Can you talk a little bit about the similarities between, and even at the minor level, like just obviously you have the Mark Messiers and the Wayne Gretzkys and the Mario Lemieux, which are great, but what are the attributes that all those leaders had that you found you could use to help you become a better leader? You know, from the coaching perspective.
Well, first of all, I was really blessed with great coaches, minor league coaches when I was young. Doug Williams was one of my coaches. He was a high school principal, played for the Whitby Dunlops, which is a senior A division in Canada, won the world championships against the Soviet Union, but he was also a teacher. And he inspired me a great deal in terms of giving me the responsibility. He would pull me aside and say, the other players are looking up to you, and you're setting an example for all of us, which was a real confidence builder. And then my uncle Bob, my dad's brother, also then coached me, was a very influential coach, and built a lot of confidence in my ability to communicate with my teammates. And I went on to junior and played for people that, again, trusted my ability and then put me in a responsible position or a leadership role. That was fostered by my parents, particularly by my mother, that really impacted my career as an athlete and then as a coach. And I think that if you can help young people, and some can be identified more than others as leaders, if you can support them and encourage them and make them feel very comfortable in their role and how they impact a team or a group or whatever setting it is. It doesn't have to necessarily be sport. It could be in academics. It can be in art. It could be in music, whatever the case might be. I think that's important to help develop young leadership skills in people,
Great point.
particularly young kids.
So we had the whole weekend to marinate on the fact that we're going to get to talk to Mike Keenan,
Yeah.
and I'm in a lot of rinks, right? And I think I start bringing it up because I'm excited. I'm like, well, what would you ask Mike Keenan? And one of the kind of things that people perceive you to be, right? Because at the professional level, they only know you from what what's seen from the outside. I think your book
Iron Mike.
yeah, Iron Mike. And
Iron Mike.
I think the book hits on that. But could you just talk as a coach about the ability, like when did you believe, or maybe you don't believe this, but the perception of you, like not being able to be soft, like, and not being able to be a player's coach, right? But you were like, I've had a great opportunity to be working with a lot of your ex-players from different aspects of what they're doing now in their lives. And I don't think anybody's ever said you were soft, but you definitely had the piece of you off like that perception. And what could you say to youth coaches now about balancing that? Like being tough, being hard, being a disciplinarian, expecting greatness, but also knowing that you need to, what you do in the background is more important than maybe what you look like on the bench.
Yeah, that's a public forum when you're on the bench, and and it can be displayed in many different ways. Stoic, it could be emotional, it can be controversial, it could be many different aspects. But you also have to have a connection to the individuals and to the people you're working with and the players, and show an empathetic trust in them and help them develop as individuals. It's like parenting. Sometimes you have to be firm, and sometimes you have to be encouraging and coddling. And it's a skill that involves many aspects of developing human behavior and reading the situation and knowing what is needed in a particular individual and or for a team setting at a particular time. And I think that, yes, I was very firm. I set the bar very high, yet I understood human behavior and could impact that process as a group and as individuals when whenever a situation surfaced. And for example, and people may, particularly from Philadelphia, the death of Pelle Lindbergh. I was a real demanding coach, but when that happened, I think that they saw a very empathetic individual that brought an element of compassion to the group that was very important.
At a time too, Mike, that when we talk about mental health, at that time it's non-existent, right? And you can tell in the book, and this is something I really admire about the book, Mike, because again, there's a reputation surrounding you, right? It's so obvious in the way this book is written, the deep care that you had for your athletes, right? And that while, yes, you were inspiring them to be the best versions of themselves, I think that's something that really comes through in the text here, is that you really cared about these people. This wasn't just about you. It wasn't just about winning, although those are important aspects. You care about your players. And I took that out of this pretty heavily.
Well, I did. And there was many times where they didn't think I did.
Right.
But
You explain that too.
It's a fine line.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really an incredibly important part of coaching, particularly young people. You have to show them that you care more than anything else about them. And it's not, don't show them what you know, show them how much you care.
Yeah.
And, all of us have knowledge about the game and whatever we're doing business, but show them that you care about them. And
I'm writing that down.
You'll get a lot better response.
Don't show them how much you know, show them how much you care. That's a brilliant quote.
Yeah, it is a different mindset now. You can't deny that. And looking back at your 5 decades of coaching, you had to change, right?
Yes.
Through the years, you evolved as a coach.
Well, you have to evolve with the generational changes.
Yeah.
And, to start in the 70s coaching and then still coaching up until now, you have to adjust to the mentality of the different generations, their needs, you have to evolve. We're on a electronic machine right now, enjoying our conversation, but this never existed when I started. So yeah, you have to change and learn as well as a coach, more than anything, if you want to continue to impact lives and if you want to impact individuals and teams, you have to make those adjustments yourself personally to be able to make those connections. And that's important because generationally, I don't have to explain it to you folks that there are ongoing changes in young people's lives and expectations and parenting. I coach the young people that are now parents and grandparents. So it's quite a difference.
Very different. Would you want to coach today?
Well, I actually just finished coaching in Italy. I was coaching the national team program there leading up to the Olympics for the last 2 years. And
fantastic.
Christie meant to ask, would you like to coach 10U hockey?
there are openings.
I've got some openings for you, Coach.
Some of those kids could use it.
I'll defer that to the younger people.
Mike, you did just bring this up. And it's a perfect time for this question. Another takeaway from the book is how much adversity you faced as a player, as a person, as a coach, but that seemed to help you build a tremendous resolve. You just mentioned it. One of the major concerns we hear from our hockey community is how our children may not be developing those resolve skills anymore. How do you think we can incorporate that into our coaching and parenting? That not the overprotective aspect, but allowing your kids to fail and deal with that adversity.
Yeah, that's really a difficult process right now because that generation or the generations ongoing and as parents, we're responsible uh, for the production of these new generational approaches, if you like. And there's nothing wrong with letting them experience setbacks in order to learn, because life is not going to be an easy ride for anyone, and is not an easy ride. There's always setbacks. It's not what happens to you, it's how you respond to what happens to you. And those are in both positive and negative circumstances. So that's a real difficult, I think, a real difficult um, dilemma and or situation for young parents today, because they want their children to be coddled, or they coddle their children to a point where they don't learn about failure. And that's part of life. You have to learn about that to be able to respond properly to difficult situations.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. That is such an important lesson for everybody to learn. I was wondering if we could dive into some of those glory days. My kids are dying to hear you talk about Gretzky and Lemieux, that championship team. It must have been a blast to coach them.
Well, they were really, this is one thing that you can tell your children, they were really respectful. I was a young man in Canada Cup 87 when I coached that team. I was 36 years old, uh, 37, and they were 26. So I was 10 years older than them. But then Wayne and Mark, they were both 26. Mario, I think, was 20 or 21.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
they were really, really taught. Well, this is a great moment for me to speak about their parents.
Okay. Let's do it.
And Walter Gretzky, Wayne's father, would ride to the arena with me for practice from the hotel. And he would sit in the front seat with me, and he'd be talking about anything that was going on that day. But he'd always turn to me and says, "Don't treat my son special. He's just one of the team members." And I says, "Mr. Gretzky's the greatest player in the world." He says, "He's not any different than any other player."
Oh,
So Wayne had heard that many times from his father. And as a result, very respectful, very humble. Certainly, they have a lot of confidence in themselves, and they should when they're at that level and have elite athletic ability in the game, particularly the game of hockey. But they're also athletes who are very, very accomplished in other sports. But the underlying part of it was that they were ready to accept the responsibility of representing their country in this case, which was very, very demanding. The Canadian public expected nothing but gold, and they were ready to put the work into invest the work and invest their abilities with each other to succeed. But the bottom line is they were. And people have asked me, "But what about the superstars?" I said, they're the easiest to coach. They just want to have you put them out in the ice at the right time, and they'll thrive on that situation. But the thing that I found amongst them, and all of them, and still even today they reach out to me, is how respectful they are of the team, of the sport, of their families, and how much they cared again about their teammates, as well as their ability to participate and contribute to the success of a group and a team.
You know, I was going to ask Mike, how did you manage those personalities? But I think what I just heard, and this is so good for our audience, is that you didn't have to, because the parenting had already prepared them to be that level of respectful, to understand those situations. And I think that might be a huge statement for our audience, and us included in that, right? Is that as parents, we play the major role in allowing our kids to be coachable and to make sure that they manage those egos and manage those situations. And that makes a coach's life easy. I mean, the coach has a responsibility, obviously, as well. But would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's really important. And, sometimes we have to educate the parents
Mhm.
and be part of that process because they get so involved with their children that they lose sight of, and they don't have the perspective that they should have in terms of guiding them through this process, because it's not an easy thing to accomplish, to be a professional athlete. Now I'm talking about the best of the best,
Right.
and it started with their parenting. I can tell you about Mark Messier's family as well. Same thing. He had both those feet on the ground at all times, and he was so inclusive as a leader with everyone in the locker room, from the fellow that would bring in the hockey sticks from some company, or the fellow that was in there that was shining shoes for the players. It didn't matter. They all felt that they had a super role and that they were super important. And if there's anything that we all can learn from them, and I did as well, how inclusive they were with everyone that was in the locker room, and also the fan base. They appreciated how much they were supported by the fan base. So I think we learned that, and Wayne and Mark taught me a lot about enjoying the fact that when you win, you can relax and enjoy it for at least 5 minutes. Because I had that personality where I'd start preparing for the next game. Like, it's 1 second after the game's over, now I'm thinking about the next game. They would say, Mike, just relax for a half hour, and then you can start worrying about the next game. So the joy of winning and the agony of defeat. I mean,
Right.
they took they're professionals and they wanted to succeed, but they understood that setback would have to be reset and focus on the next possibility.
Right. And that's so important for all of us to remember, because we're always worried about what's next, right? Sometimes you just have to live in the moment and savor those victories. Well, let's talk about the pinnacle of hockey, the Stanley Cup. That the most celebrated moment of your hockey coaching career?
Yeah, I would think it would be. Yeah, and particularly how difficult it was to win.
Mm.
I was fortunate in 9 years I was in the league. I'd already been to the Stanley Cup 4 times, the Final Four 3 other times. So when Mark, which was unexpected, was skating at me with the cup, and I was wondering what he was doing, and then he handed me the cup, and I instantly raised it, as you saw in the book.
Yeah.
Got a picture right here for the people
Oh,
watching it. Just the
Uh,
exact
what
moment.
a moment, right?
it was, yeah, it was really surreal, incredible that he had the presence in all of that celebratory moments to acknowledge. And I was really humbled by the fact that he even gestured or did that. It never had happened in the history of the NHL, and I don't know if it's happened since.
I don't think so.
But he, again, that inclusiveness, and he writes, and he's very generous in writing the forward in the book, that he mentioned that we wouldn't have won if it wasn't for the coach and the coaches. So that was a really uh, emotional and a moment that you never forget.
I do
Absolutely.
got to bring this up real quick because I read this in your book. It was in the acknowledgments. All right. I think it's important for parents to hear this. All right. You say in the book that the birth of your daughter was the only thing really that trumped this
Mm.
Stanley Cup. And the
Mhm.
reason I'm bringing that up is that parents, if you wanted to know what a Stanley Cup championship feels like, you experienced it with the birth of your child. I joke about that sometimes because so many of us dream of that, right? Growing up as parents or as hockey fans. And I think it's important we remind everybody that you've experienced something better than that already in your life with your children. Don't forget that.
Well, I think that again, through that particular process, you don't take it for granted,
For sure.
and that's important. So
Absolutely. Mike, I've been,
life
go ahead.
is not to be taken for granted.
Right. Hey, can we talk about the other part of your life that a lot of people might not know about? And if you're from Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo, you know about Nick and the Nice Guys. And if you go to the middle of Mike's book, he includes a song that you wrote. What? Tell us about this other side of your life, the softer
Well, that
side.
goes back to St. Lawrence University,
Yeah.
and I think it was my sophomore year. A fellow named Gary Webb from Burlington,
Yeah.
Ontario, who now lives in Rochester,
Yeah.
actually Victor, which is outside of Rochester. He was an accomplished musician, and at 14 years of age, he backed up Harry Belafonte. Some of the younger people would know who Harry Belafonte is.
Deo.
At Expo 60,
Deo.
yeah, at Expo 67, I think it was.
Right.
And Gary was just a young musician, so we were hanging out in the locker room one day and practice, and he says, "Why don't we start a band?"
Wow.
And it was interesting that the hockey players, one fellow who I was raised with, Eric Sanford, he could play the bass, and he also could play the drums. And Ron Harris, also a hockey player from Canada, could play the drums. So Eric learned to play the bass upside down because he's left-handed. Gary could play the lead guitar or any instrument you wanted, and Ron was the drummer. And so it just grew from there. And then we started to a point where it was a distraction. I'd have to tell them, I was one of the captains of the team, and I'd say, guys, stop talking about the music. Let's talk about the game. And then after the game, we'll talk about the music. Because we started after games, we started playing at sororities and fraternities and
Yeah.
on campus parties, and then up at an A Bay, Alexandria Bay, and then different parts of, and then it expanded from there, and then it was dissolved, and then I ended up going to Rochester to coach the American Hockey League, and Gary happened to be a partner in. I think it's called Deloitte and Touche, or Touche and Deloitte, accounting firm. He was an accountant. His wife, Pam, was a lawyer. And he said, why don't we start the band again? So we started the band again. And the Eastman School of Music is right there. So it was easy to get musicians for young people. And Gary quit his partnership and just started to focus on music again and built this empire, Nick and the Nice Guys, in the
Yeah.
vignettes of Nick Blues, Nick Country, Nick Orchestra. So it was, and it still exists today. He's done a
It
super
does.
job making a business as well as. So anyway, get back to your question. It was, he came down to see me in Key West, and we were watching a Super Bowl. And I have no idea why this happened, but I just stood up and went to the kitchen counter. I said, Gary, just give me a minute. And I wrote the song.
Isn't that something?
It was like, I don't know where it came from. It just came out of my head.
That is so
And
cool.
what it had to do with the Super Bowl, I have no idea. But
But see, I think that's a part of you that few people even know about. You've got this music inside of you too, and this creative aspect. You're not just this
well,
iron
I'm
mind
also
tough
proud of
coach.
I wrote some poetry, and there's one in
Yes.
so that those also just came out of the blue. I'd be sitting there and all of a sudden start to write some poetry. I don't know where it comes from. Maybe there's an artistic side of some
I
kind
think
in my
so.
brain. I don't know.
Well, you have to be a coach too, I think. You've got to have that
Yeah,
creativity
it's the
flow too.
art and science of coaching
Yeah.
is impacted by the mathematical part of it. I started, maybe it'd be interesting for you to listen to this. Maybe I wrote it in the book. I can't remember, but when I had the superstars in the room in 87, and I was trying to figure out how am I going to figure this out for these guys to accept roles that they're all playing major roles in their teams, but they can't all play major roles. So I asked them how many minutes there were in a hockey game, and Larry Murphy jumps up and says, "Of course, everybody says there's 60." I said, "No, there's actually 720, 360 minutes distributed by each team, and it's your responsibility as a coach to distribute those 360 minutes. You start with the goalie or goalies, depends on how the game's going. They get 60, and then you have to figure out how you're going to disperse the other 300 minutes. And your responsibility at an elite level then is to know how the other coach is going to disperse his 300 minutes. When are those players coming out? How many minutes are they going to play? You're playing against Pittsburgh. How many minutes is Sidney Crosby going to play, and what minutes are they?" And so that's the mathematical part of it. And then the artistic part of it is to have a feeling, which I was very blessed to have that skill, to know exactly when an individual is really on top of his game, because we're not always on top of our games every day. We're all human and we fluctuate. So your ability to read that and to read the situation and to read the context of what's going on, and particularly at that moment, is the art side of it. So it's the art and science of coaching.
Well,
That's what you asked me the question initially.
That's so fun.
And that was also very, very exciting for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's a symphony, right? Like, and
It is.
Here's the thing: you can't be part of a symphony if you only know one instrument. You have to understand what everybody's doing. You can't be a conductor by only knowing one instrument. And Mike, one of the things we talk about all the time on this show, specifically for the kids, is that you have to be more than just a hockey player. You have to look beyond that identity, especially when you're young and you want to explore the arts or something else, whether it's music or writing. There's 1,000 different applications here, but the creative nature of music, of again, writing, the arts, I think that's an important skill set too. And also, again, to help you identify beyond just, okay, I'm a left winger or I'm a forward on this team, right? Like you want to be great at stuff. You got to experience other things, both in the game and outside the game.
Well, I'll speak to that a little bit, and generational again, and parents. If parents are listening, I'd like to listen to this because today the young child is, I don't know if the right word is pigeonholed, but he's a hockey player. And he goes to summer school and plays hockey or learns to skate, plays hockey. And I felt it was important when I was a youngster, and I feel it's important today, and even I'll reflect upon Wayne Gretzky's growing up, to play many sports. I mentioned I played lacrosse, I played baseball, I played soccer, I ran track and field. Besides hockey, and I loved hockey. Don't get me wrong, I loved it. But I think you learn a lot by investing yourself in different games and then different arts and music and whatever you could be impacted. My dad played the drums, so I was around the drummer. I was around a pipe band, and I don't know if people know what a pipe band is, but young people, I don't know if they know what a pipe band would be. So you're impacted, and I think that you learn different skill sets, and certainly in the sporting world, you learn a lot about your athletic ability, your athleticism, your preparation. They all demand different skill sets to be prepared to play in that particular game, or to participate in music, or to participate in a theater. I was around theater in high school as well. I sang a solo to the high school, the Danny Boy, one year. I don't know how I did all this stuff, but it was an Irish background. So
Yeah.
St. Patty's Day, they asked me to sing Danny Boy to the high school. So on stage. So, different experiences that impact
Yeah.
you. You have no idea what they are
I want
going
to see
to
that.
mean to you as an
Iron
adult.
Mike
I
singing
want,
Danny Boy.
Yeah.
Who would
I want
have
to see
ever
that. I want to
guessed?
see that. I want to see that video. I want to see that video.
Me
But
too.
Well,
if I,
thank God, there's no video cameras around at the time.
I think Mike, you brought up, going back earlier a little bit about like the symphony of coaching, and and we have a lot of, obviously we have parents listening with players. Can you talk a little bit about like how we have, like, we perceive it as like, well, I'm just watching my kid, like I'm watching my son out there or daughter doing their thing, and I want to know why the coach isn't using my son and daughter the right way. Can you just talk about, like, just give a little insight on the fact that, well, you're not focused on that son or daughter. You're not focused on Wayne Gretzky. You're focused on, how am I going to put all these pieces together so that I can get Wayne Gretzky on the ice when they don't have, another player? Can I make sure that this guy's on the ice when that team's not using their best player? I mean, and just talk about how you look at it from a coaching perspective, understanding that you do care about the kids' ice time and want to get everybody included, but maybe just talk about that little juggling act a little bit.
Yeah, it's part of the coaching acumen and responsibility. And again, at different levels. At the amateur level, I think you try to disperse the ice time as well as you can. And there's something to be taught in terms of learning to play and then playing and then winning. And I think those are all different parts of what transpires at various levels. You're talking about a 4-year-old, which I was when I learned to skate. And you're learning to skate and you're playing on ponds and there are no rules. You just play. And then you get structured into a team. And now you have to understand that I'm a forward or I'm a defense or I'm a goalie. And I have teammates and I'm part of uh, what the coach is trying to work with. And there's different components and different abilities. And I'm a great shot blocker, but I can't score worth beans. Or I'm a great scorer, but I don't know anything about back checking and all the components of what makes this game, for me, the most spectacular game in the world because of the speed and the complexities. And it's not like baseball, you run out of bounds, or football, you run out of bounds. Basketball, you run out of bounds. There's no running out of bounds. You either get back to the bench or you're going to get run into a wall or get hit into a wall or you run out of space. So it's dealing with all those. Your mind has to be focused on the spatial aspect of that context of what you're playing in, particularly when you are inside an arena. If you're out in a pond, that's a different story. But the coach is trying, for the most part, if they've got the right focus, if they want their children to enjoy the game, then there should be distribution of ice time almost equally. And then as you get into more competitive levels, then some of the aspect is to teach them how to win, which is difficult. It requires a lot different mindset.
Unless you're Alexei Kovalov, right? Then you just give him as much ice time as you want.
Exactly.
Right.
What do you think, Mike, about the skill level today as you're watching these players and we're seeing moves like we've never seen before? It's such a faster, just intense game, and the level of skating, it's remarkable, isn't it?
Well, it really is, but I was fortunate to have the best of the best. I'd put Wayne Gretzky skating or Mark Messier skating or Mario Lemieux skating or Raymond Bourque or Paul Coffey up against any of these kids today, Connor McDavid, so on, one of the best skaters in the world. And yeah, they have a skill set I don't see until the playoffs, and I'm hoping that there'll be a kind of a resurgence of it, of the competitive values that I saw. If you go back to our 94 Stanley Cup Game 7, it was vicious. And no, I'm not saying that that's the way the game should be played, but it was vicious,
Which is
hard, competitive, physical, mean. And the NHL I watched today, they're certainly skilled, but I don't see that aspect. And maybe that's the way it should be played. I don't know.
Huh.
And I evolved as a coach, understanding that. But I'll go back to the example now of the last Stanley Cup champion was Florida Panthers, and they played more old school than new school. And there might be a pushback because it's at the NHL professional level, monkey see, monkey do. Excuse the expression. So there might be a pushback to be more competitive in terms of their preparation than a higher skill set. And a good example of that, they're playing against the Edmonton Oilers with the best hockey player in the world. And you can get into bench management. I don't know if you remember the game, but Connor McDavid in the final game never got on the ice until 6 or 7 minutes into the game because he didn't start the game. Then they had to kill off a penalty. He just doesn't do the penalty killing. So now the best player in the world, is not on the ice for 6 or 7 minutes.
Yeah.
So that's the mathematics of it. I mean, Mark Messier started every game we played. So
yeah, get him out there first and establish your game.
Again, there's a point. Make the opponent play into your hand, not you play into their hand. So lots of mathematics involved in that.
That's the chess of hockey.
Yeah.
Mike, another part of that chemistry, that symphony, is something that I'm enthralled with and obsessed with. It's just team building, team bonding. And I think there were several coaches that were ahead of the curve on this. I think about Fred Shiro, Anatoly Tarasov, Herb Brooks. And I've always put you into a bucket with those guys as someone who understood the importance and had a clear understanding of what a team bond should be and how vital that is to winning. And in fact, you state that in the book, many of the decisions you make throughout your career had that in mind. I don't believe even today that that's a concept that's as widely understood as some would believe. Can you tap into how that team bond correlates directly to championship culture? And again, you kind of alluded to this a few minutes ago.
Well, it's the synergism of it all. The energy, the skill set can be greater as a group than it can be as an individual. And the more that you're able to capture that, to have that energy come out, and it sounds a little weird or different, but to have those energies come together and develop a force, develop a personality as a team, collectively caring so much for each other. That, I think, is the essence of building an ultimate and championship team and teams.
Yeah, and you
That's the
you did
secret
that
sauce.
Yeah. No, it is. It's when we look at your at least we'll talk about beyond your NHL career, the speed at which most of these teams came together and really found winning. Right, it didn't always result in a Stanley Cup, obviously, but what you did with the Flyers, you just happened to come up against the greatest dynasty probably in sports. You did it with New York. You did it with Chicago. I mean, you did it in Russia. It just seemed and with speed, right? It wasn't a 10-year process.
Yeah.
And I always, again, just from the words you wrote, you were willing to move players that were not willing to buy into that system or the standard or whatever, however you want to quantify it. So I think that's a huge lesson that, especially when I think about youth coaching, there's a responsibility on the organization as well for the coach to develop that force, as you put it, that identity, because that plays into winning. If you're just going out there and throwing your best 2-3 players out there all the time, which I've seen, I mean, you're missing the point. That's not a recipe for success all the time, right? So I think if you're in a competitive environment in hockey, or even not competitive, right? I think that developing that identity, that team bond, which you've done, is essential if you want to win.
But I think it can be described also as culture.
Yeah.
And that builds an expectation that all players must contribute, regardless of what their role is. If a guy's playing, and I'm talking about pro now, if he's playing 5 minutes, those 5 minutes are just as important as Wayne Gretzky's 25 minutes. Because if he doesn't do his job in those 5 minutes, the team isn't going to be successful.
Right.
So to get them to understand that, first of all, and then to buy into it and to accept it. And that was probably the main component of all championship teams that I coached, that there was no selfish components. They had sometimes had to learn to accept their role. It was maybe a little bit less than they wanted, or sometimes it was greater than they wanted, or they excelled and built themselves into a role that was even greater than they expected. So that bonding, if you like, process is extremely, extremely important for a team to succeed. This is a team sport. We're not playing tennis. We're not playing golf. We're playing hockey, which is a team sport.
Yeah, I'm wondering
All
how would you live in the world of the portal now, with college hockey, and the fact that if a player doesn't like their role, they just go into the portal and they go to a team that will let them play the role they want to play, right? So how hard it is, even at the professional level now. I
Right.
mean, it's really sneaking in. It's in there
Right.
where a player's agent just calls and says, "I need that player moved." And
Right.
he's got to go play. He wants to play this role. So, I mean, do you think it's knowing that you've gone from the NHL to now going to a different that culture, right, of Italy, right? So you're in Italy, and do you find it easier and say, well, wow, these players are looking at me like, oh my God, like this is Mike Keenan, that's with me here today. So am I acclimating to Mike Keenan, or are you still fighting that battle to get those players to understand that they have to play a certain role to compete against the best uh, systems in the world?
I think now you're talking about cultural differences in society. And one of the easiest groups that I ever coached was in Russia, because they had a different mentality about the importance of the coach.
Wow.
The coach is revered there. At least, again, when I went there, they knew who I was and where I came from, but that went back to '87, because the Soviet Union, who never broadcast games, broadcasted those games in the Soviet Union in 1987. Those kids were just being coddled by their parents who were watching me. They were too young to have seen that. But so that cultural differences, again, and I will speak to that. When I went to Russia, Mike Plino, assistant coach of mine and associate coach, and a player that played for me in junior and also university. And I said, the most important thing for us to do when we arrive there is to understand, not to be understood. For us to understand their culture, their mentality, their approach to living, their approach to the game, their approach to society, their approach to each other. And as soon as we were able to comprehend and understand that, we became very successful very fast.
Yeah.
And
that's an incredible experience. Yeah.
Yeah, but that is to sort of address what's going on in North America today is a different set of circumstances, and you have to have the ability to gain the respect of the individuals so that they don't want to say, oh, you're not playing me the way I want to play, so I'm going to leave. You have to have them embrace the fact that, you can stay and we can really build something special here, and you can celebrate success and learn about winning. And Yeah, you can go over to the plan or team B and be a superstar, but you'll never experience winning or the camaraderie or the love that you have for a teammate there because you're just focused on yourself. And that to me is and some of it's driven financially. They think they can go somewhere else and make more money, and I understand that as well. But those are choices we make, and for me, I was really fortunate to have people and players that wanted to buy into success rather than not.
So that's really important to develop that team culture, that mindset, and I think it's important for all coaches to listen to that piece of advice. And that's one of the reasons you can point to having success so quickly, because as Lee mentioned, your success wasn't over decades; it came quickly for these teams, and I think that's a key component is that culture. And this transfer portal, like you mentioned, is kind of messing up college sports big time. Our college coach at Syracuse University just just had said he was pretty upset about some of these kids jumping in the transfer portal, calling them snakes, you know. And but that's the problem: is what are you teaching these kids? What incentive do they have to stay other than money? You got to have that culture. If you want to play for me, buy into it. We're gonna have a winning, successful team. Yeah,
I think that's a difficult choice, and it's influenced. Again, we're going back to parenting.
yeah,
I mean, if you accept a scholarship at Syracuse and you go there, and you should try to contribute to that team that you have been given the opportunity to be a part of, and people are paying your schooling, um, rather than saying, "Ah, this hasn't worked for me. I can go to some other university and be a superstar or get more uh, floor time if I'm a basketball player or play a different
And
position,
money
whatever
now
it
too.
is."
And
and
money now
money.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it's influenced also, and you brought the word up, agents.
Hmm.
Uh, they take the approach that they have a responsibility to make that individual the most money that they can, because now they're sort of in a professional realm rather than a academic university setting, because this opening now in sponsorship, you've got young athletes at the university making millions of dollars from sponsorship. So
Right.
it's a completely different animal right now,
Yeah.
and they have to sort that out.
Right. It's tough to put the genie back in the bottle, but hopefully
Oh,
we can control
Yeah,
it somehow.
that's a whole other episode. That's a whole other episode of
Yeah.
Yeah.
how we're
That's an
seeing that.
anthology series, not
Yeah.
just another episode.
How do we pick 8U hockey scholarships? I guess.
Yeah.
But geez, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, I think the key takeaway, Mike, here from this last bit of conversation is like whether you're in Russia, China, America, Italy, north, south, east, west, culture is important, and having your players buy into that culture
Right.
is part of the things that a coach or an organization can help build. And when that culture is stronger than what you want, when it's what we want over what you want, not only are you going to attract better people, right, but you're going to have a better product. You're going to have a better process, a better team. And I think that that's something that it goes so far beyond hockey, right? I think that human beings are meant to work together. And I think that a lot of the stuff going on, especially in North America, is driving us away from that belief. That's something I'm pretty passionate about bringing back in my coaching, in my parenting, and in my daily life. Is we need to learn to work together again,
Yeah.
and because miraculous things come from that.
Hmm.
I can give you another example, and I don't know if people would really know about it, but living in China, they had a rule in the country that you could only have one child
Mm-hmm.
Right.
for many, many, many years. So what I found there was that these individuals that came from a single family were developed by six adults, were cared by six adults, their parents, and then the two grandparents on each side.
Mm-hmm.
And they had very little team skills. They didn't know how to communicate with other individuals. They were all single children. Now, not to say that every single child or families that only have one child, but when you have a whole country is like that, it's a different mentality. And to bring them together in a team sport is a real challenge because it's not their fault. They're just not used to it. They
Right.
don't know what that means.
No.
And they have to be taught. You can be taught, but there's a learning curve involved.
Well, it's a tremendous example of how culture is not a linear path. It changes. It's different. Upbringing plays into it, parenting, grandparenting, coaching, environment. All of this plays into how culture is developed and that environment plays out.
Well, there really is. And you're a product of two things, your DNA and your environment.
Right.
So
You can control one of them for the most,
Right.
yeah,
for the most part. Mike,
you
I
try
want,
to anyway.
yeah, right. It was very little that all of us have control over. That's one of the big awakening moments I always have with my players and other people. Is that you control almost nothing
Exactly.
in this world, and very little in your own life.
Yeah.
Mike, in the few minutes we have left, I'd actually love for you to talk directly to the kids that listen to this show. And we have a really large audience of young youth hockey players. And where I want to direct that question or those thoughts, as we've said it, you've managed some of the greatest players of all time. You've also managed just hockey players and people in general. You've had to manage people in a band. You've had to manage people in college. For the kid out there that's listening, and that kid's dream is the NHL or to play hockey at a high level. You've seen it. What is your guide for that kid on this journey? What do they need to keep in mind? What do they need to keep doing to make that opportunity a possibility?
I think that there's a few things, but a couple would be, first of all, uh, you have to have faith in your beliefs, in your passion, and what you want to accomplish in life. And secondly, you have to work. Nothing is free. You can be the most talented. And if you are the most talented, and again, we cite the people that I coached that were, but they also knew how to work and how to get prepared and how to be better. From the Wayne Gretzky's to the Mario Lemieux, the Mark Messiers, and it goes on, and all the Hall of Famers I coached, they knew how to work. They had a talent and they had a passion and they cared, but they had to learn how to discipline themselves and work at what they wanted to accomplish. And whether it's music, art, doesn't matter whether you're a technician, a plumber, fireman, doesn't matter. If you want to be the best that you can be, then you have to have that idea that you have to be devoted to developing those skill sets or that ability, whatever it takes.
I love that. And
And if at the same time, if it's a passion, then it doesn't seem like work. It seems
Right.
like you're loving what you're doing. So,
Right.
that's all part of, if you can find that niche that really excites you and you're passionate about, then you should make it happen.
well, and I love that you led with faith on that, because the faith is also within yourself, right? And for the kids listening, it can be very easy to look outside yourself or that need for other people to believe in you. But Mike, you just kind of said it. The real person that needs to believe in you is you. That
That's
comes
right.
from within you. So for the kids listening, like, you have to be inspired by what Coach just said there. But the idea is this: if you want to accomplish anything, this is not just for hockey, what Mike is saying here. You've got to find that feeling within you to get up and put that work in. And here's the other thing, kids: there's no guarantees. There's no guarantees that what you want will come to fruition. But I promise you that if you put the work in and the time in, not only will you get way further than anybody thought possible, but you will learn so much about yourself and who you are and what you can accomplish. That is so important. So I'm going to say it again: faith in yourself, faith in general, obviously very important. You have to believe in something bigger than yourself, but you got to believe in yourself. And Mike, I'll tell you just a quick story. We were actually in Lake Placid, a place I know you're very fond of. And we were in a tournament. I was so proud of these kids. And I want the parents to listen, to know this too, that are listening. These kids were 10 years old. So we're not talking 18, 17. These are 10-year-old kids. And before a big game, the messages were, you know, as hard as we work, there's someone out there working harder than us. We got to be those guys today. And then another kid stood up and said, you know, as hard as we're going, we got 40% more than we think we do. Those were the messages these kids were giving themselves at 10 years old. I was so proud of that locker room before that game, right? And after the game, obviously. But the wherewithal to understand we need to work. We need to work to accomplish our goals. So, Mike, I love that you brought that up.
Well, it's not easy, and for the kids to realize it and to understand it, it takes education, takes time. You know, I was very passionate and wanted to be an NHL player, but I didn't have the ability in the end. But I found another way of getting there. So,
yeah,
as you
your
pointed
backup
out,
plan worked. Yeah,
there's no guarantees. So if it doesn't work in plan A, then at least you've prepared yourself and you've developed some skills that gives you a chance at plan B or C, whatever the case might be.
Well, Mike, this has been a real honor, not just a great
Yes.
interview, but a real honor to have you on. I do want to plug the book one more time. Right
Yes.
before we close this. Iron Mike, My Life Behind the Bench. If you're listening to this podcast, and Mike, this is the audience that would love this, pick this up, get the audiobook, whatever. You will not be disappointed. This was an enjoyable read. I'm going to say it again. I felt like we were sitting with you for several weeks in reading this book. You can tell all three of us read
For
it.
you.
Right.
Yeah.
Like a hockey encyclopedia. Full disclosure, Mike, I was really nervous about you coming on and interviewing you because, you know, you're Iron Mike, right? But what a joy you are. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your advice, your experiences, and very inspirational conversation today.
Thank you. And I hope that you continue your good work with the children, because that's important. They need the guidance.
Thank you, sir. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey with Mike Keenan, an honor, a tribute, a gentleman and a scholar, and a musician. We'll see you on the next episode.
Not really.
Not yet. Well, we're gonna. There's the
We
music
gotta
in the
get
book.
him to sing Danny Boy, at least the opening line.
You know, I'm great at turning the radio on.
There you go. We could have gone viral, Mike. All right, guys, listen. That's going to do it for this episode. Remember, if you have a question or a comment, find the link in the description of this episode. You can text us or email us at team@ourkidsplayhockey.com. But for Christie, for Mike Keenan, I'm Lee Elias. We'll see you on the next episode of Our Kids
Thank you,
Play
folks. Ciao.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to like and subscribe right now if you found value wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Also, make sure to check out our children's book, When Hockey Stops, at whenhockeystops.com. It's a book that helps children deal with adversity in the game and in life. We're very proud of it. But thanks so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we'll see you on the next episode.